Do you have your papers? Nein, not intimidating enough. Show me your papers now, please. Yeah, that's it.
Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb is a 2003 action-adventure video game developed by the Collective and published by LucasArts for the Xbox, Microsoft Windows, PlayStation 2, and OS X. It was made back during the golden age of LucasArts games where, if you were a fan of any of the LucasArts IP, such as Indiana Jones or Star Wars, video games were aplenty. This game in particular serves as a prequel of sorts to the second movie, The Temple of Doom. Featuring classic Drew Struzan artwork on the cover, known for other Indiana Jones films, Star Wars, Blade Runner, and The Thing, as well as many other films of the era, and being recently re-released on Steam, I thought it'd be worth giving it a shot. I got the game on PC, and this will be the version I'm showing here. When you think of action-adventure games where a guy hunts for artifacts, with bad guys in the way, I think for most people the name that comes to mind these days is Uncharted. But while both games feature climbing and puzzles and shooting through exotic locations, that's where the similarities kind of end. In terms of design priorities, while Uncharted is a game known for its stunning and thrilling set pieces and interactive spectacle, this game, on the other hand, has its priorities elsewhere. Those being fun level design, where each level acts as a combat puzzle and puzzle. One of my main problems with games of the era is the level design. I'm not a big fan of the find and exit gameplay, if you will. You know, when you're just stumbling around the map looking for where to end the level. Well, for the time, its level design of this game is actually quite intuitive, but doesn't feel like it's trying to hold the player's hand. Objects and locations of interest stand out from the scenery in a natural way that doesn't take away from the feeling of exploring these mysterious locations, despite some parts later in the game where trial and error hazards become more common, and what to do is rather vague for the most part. For its time, though, the game holds up spectacularly in the way that you can just play it and not get lost without feeling like you're going down in like a thinly disguised corridor, like a lot of modern games deal with it. The feeling of freedom and a mostly straightforward level design actually massively contributes to immersing the player in Indy's shoes, giving you a full inventory of things you'd expect to be able to use in an indie game. Got your whip, revolver, canteen. It's all there at your disposal at all times, letting you play the way you want. And letting you use all the items that it would make sense for you to be able to apply in that situation. Whether it's crossing a pitfall or making your enemies drop their weapons, while still making you feel good at the game as you find where to go next and uncover some new location, progressing through the game. The elements are all fairly simple, I'd say, just good game design really, but the way they come together becomes more than just the sum of its parts. I mean, for goodness sake, you can punch enemy hats off during combat, and you can also get Indy's hat punched off, and you have to go back and get it and put it back on. Why wouldn't this be a mechanic? It's obvious, yet the inclusion of such attention to detail really elevates this game to more than just a janky adventure platformer from the early 2000s. That said, there is jank aplenty. Some of the controls are a little outdated, and using an X-input gamepad like the PS4 controller or an Xbox One isn't quite as simple as it is with games today. Occasionally jumps onto ledges don't quite register, and when that happens several times in a row, in a location with sparse checkpoints, it can become a tiny bit frustrating. The combat is unfortunately somewhat marred by this, especially when it comes to long-ranged weapons. While there is a first-person stationary camera mode that lets you fire off precise shots, the level design rarely accommodates its use, And without a gun in Indy's hand, it's hard to tell the actual line of fire when shooting from cover, resulting in losing precious ammo. So for the most part, you're going to use the normal third-person targeting system, which includes holding down left shift or just pointing Indy at a guy and hoping he auto-aims onto the right guy. With multiple NPCs in a fight, as is usual, this can quickly become overwhelming. It doesn't help that the revolver and Luger pistols are rather underpowered for how scarce their ammo is. And while the shotgun is sufficiently powerful, its ammo is even more rare. It feels more like a power-up than truly a tool and an integral part of your arsenal. The machete gives you more reach in melee combat, allowing you to do like a lunge stab attack to enemies too far to reach with your fists, but it deals so little damage that it feels it's not worth it, honestly. The whip is only good for knocking weapons out of enemies' hands, and when you do pull it off, it's highly satisfying. It can also knock enemies on their feet, but the problem with both of the above is that it's quite situational, because it takes Indy like a second to swap between the whip and another weapon or fists, and by that point, the AI is probably already back up running full speed towards you. Speaking of, though, the AI is actually really smart and has a lot of things that they can do, which helps the combat feel unpredictable and dynamic, keeping the player up on their toes at all times. If they drop a weapon, they can pick it back up and often run to do so if there are allies present to keep Indy busy. They will also pick up weapons dropped by their allies and use them against you too, and even weapons that you drop yourself. They will use environmental objects as well. Table legs, wine bottles, and chairs to throw at or bash Indy with. You also have the ability to use those environmental objects, so as a result of this, the combat sometimes feels like it's a WWE TLC match, but in a good way, where even if you're losing, it's kind of fun to watch, just seeing what will happen next. And as it's all dynamic, it keeps things pretty fresh. The animations on the melee are genuinely great. They seem to be moves that are either lifted from the movies or directly inspired by them. You can grab, do a light combo, or heavy combo, run into your opponent, knock him down, and kick him if they're lying on the floor or are below you. It's definitely that attention to detail I mentioned earlier that ties it all together. It elevates what could have been potentially a boring average combat system. The enemies also do have unique animations and movesets depending on who you're fighting. With some heavier enemies unable to run around as much or even jog, but dealing devastating damage up close once they get you, while lighter enemies will dodge your blows and try to get a combo in on you. There is one more weapon later in the game, but I won't spoil it. Speaking of spoilers, the story is rather simple, and only really serves as background to tie the levels together in my opinion. It goes something like this. Hey, Dr. Jones, there's an artifact in a country that's exotic enough for Westerners to not know much about it, with a rich history that's related to an ancient dude of high standing in his society, and I wanted to totally not rule the world. A motivation I will make zero effort to hide from you, but just neglect to mention. I'm Eva, by the way. Well, I see you got a hot chick there. Hello, baby. Of course I will help. When the man you trusted before backstabs you, I'll be there to get the girl in the end. Let's go punch some Nazis. And Nazis he punched aplenty. No, seriously, it feels like he beat up the entire German army by the end of this game, and towards the end of the game there's 2 sequences I don't have footage of, where Indy has to shoot down some planes, and I swear, by the end of it, I must have shot down like a triple-digit amount of planes. But the story is fine here, really. I know I kind of just made fun of it, but really it's good enough. This isn't Star Trek or something. You just need some plot that makes you pumped to go on an adventure, and as far as those go, this is a pretty good one. I think one aspect I didn't like about the game that others may enjoy is that it kind of goes on for too long. As I said, the locations are varied, puzzles do stay fresh, although keep to a general formula or finding a lever to pull, an item to use on a thing, or look at some symbols here and connect the dots on the clock there. But at a certain point, I felt like the game was simply overstaying its welcome. I like my games short and sweet. And I feel like this game ended like 5 hours too late. By the time the flying lady boss happened, I already felt it was late for the climax, but then it just keeps going and going. It's not even like the second to last boss fight, I think. Perhaps some levels should have been designated as like bonus levels rather than be built into the story, or maybe even left on the cutting room floor entirely. It's deceptive to count the levels and think that's all there is when each level or chapter, as they're referred to in this game, has like 15 sub areas that don't feel overly distinct from one another. Perhaps lessening the amount of sub areas in each level might have made it more interesting as well. By the time I finished the first level, that's the tutorial, that's before the level called Prologue, I was already running out of hard drive space to even store this footage on. You might think I'm dunking on this game a lot, and that is true. However, I still enjoyed it and do recommend it. It's just that the good elements are kind of hard to summarize without saying the game makes you feel like Indiana Jones and is immersive, while the negatives simply have a lot more to discuss about them. One thing worth noting is that, to my knowledge, both the GOG and the Steam release currently do not support either widescreen or frame rates above 30 FPS and come with some bad audio quality that the original PC retail release also did. Which is a shame because for a lot of people the game not working out of the box as it should is a big turnoff, and I totally understand that. But if I have sold you on the game here, and you're willing to do some extra steps to make your experience more modern, then there are things on the PC Gaming Wiki listed that actually easily take care of all the issues. Uncapping the frame rate or setting it to 60 FPS involves just editing a game config file, and the widescreen patch and the high quality audio from the Xbox version are just a download to drag and drop. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. Definitely check out the game, check out my other videos. I've got plenty of long videos on computers and retro stuff. I have short videos on games. I've got more retro video game reviews coming, more longer videos, reviews coming. So, stay tuned, yeah? See ya.